efficiency, a reasonable assurance of a negative cross-match, and what it does is increase the donor recruitment area. In kidneys, this is not as much of a problem as it is in livers and hearts, where you have about a 4 to 6 hour window before the organ begins to deteriorate, and there's no way to pump it or keep it going or perfuse it adequately without cold time just destroying it. This then allows you to go from just an immediate local donor, or in our case, go some 500 miles out to Oklahoma City or over to Mississippi and bring an organ in from there with a reasonable assurance of competency and integrity of the organ and the fact that it would have a potential negative cross-match. The keys then are these unacceptable antigens and their clinical relevance, as I told you. What you want to do is look at the strength of the antibody as a predictor of a positive cytotoxic cross-match, or if you have determined this by your PRA by cytotoxicity, then you have that information already. You can use a cytotoxic or a flow cross-match to back it up. You need to look at peak and recurrent serum, and you establish in your institution how many of each or what you're going to consider a peak or recurrent serum. And in looking at this originally, when this test came out, we tried to relate single antigen B MFI numbers, their fluorescent intensity numbers, with our cross-match procedures, our flow cross-match. And what we found was from 0 to 30% calculated PRA approached linearity. Patients with greater than 70% and above was fairly linear, and in between you had high MFIs and low to no flow cross-match positivities, or low MFIs and high flow cross-match results. And that just didn't make sense at all, and started to think about it a little bit. And it sounded like to me that there was a stoichiometric relationship between the amount of protein that was bound on this bead and the amount of antibody that was in the serum. And so we just did a simple thought process right here. Was this a production or a technique problem? So we used various lots and got pretty much the same result. We had 3 or 4 people do the same test, so it wasn't a technique problem. We found that antibodies can vary by several thousands. And was this still a valid measure of strength? No, it didn't give the degree of reproducibility we would want. We then came up, why are some flow cross matches negative when the MFIs are high? Why are some positive when the MFIs are low? And we asked then, is there a prozone effect with these antibodies? Is it because you're holding the antigen content constant on that bead, the antibodies can't bind to it, and so they sterically hinder each other and they bounce off of it. An example here is we have a patient with an A2 antibody that's above 12,000. The next month it's down to about 6,000. Then it goes up to about 8,000. Goes almost to 9,000 and back down to 8,000. The CPRA stays pretty much the same, except here we've got an antigen in there that had a higher frequency than the population. But there are month-to-month fluctuations, and if you have data like this, you can't use a number like MFI to be a true measure of strength. So what we did then was try to at least establish some relevance. If you remember our iceberg again, 8,000 MFIs and above in our system doing the normalization that we do, you could predict at least 95% would have a positive cytotoxic cross-match. If you look at ELISA and flow, the bottom line of flow was about 4,000 MFI for a weekly positive flow cross-match or flow B cross-match. And then the PT arrays and the SABs can go further down as far as MFIs. But these are weak antibodies and they are important. And I think the message to take away here is if this number appears, or you have a number that appears with an antibody, there is the great chance that is a real antibody. And what you have to do in your laboratory is determine your signal-to-noise ratio. What MFIs is the range for your 0% reactors. And then you have to consider anything above this with a specificity. And this is important on the post-transplant side, where you're looking at the presence of donor-specific antibody, where any antibody can become important. What we did then was normalize this data and develop this kind of category approach. We had very strong, greater than 15,000. This was strong positive cytotoxic and flow TMB cross-matches. We have strong 8,000 to about 15,000. Decreasing cytotoxic positivity, still strong flow. Moderate 4,000 to 7,000. Cytotoxic maybe at the upper range and decreasing flow positivity. And at about 3,500, we have a weak B flow cross-match at the upper range going to negative at the lower. And anything below 2,000 is a negative cross-match in our system. Well, what's the answer? We can't live with something like this and be able to make some interpretation of it. Well, we went back to Immunology 101. We did dilutions. When in doubt, dilute. Okay. And what we found in doing several hundred serial dilutions of these problem patients that we had, where the cross-match results didn't match the antibody MFIs, we found indeed that these antibodies do prozone because of the limited amount of antigen that's available on the support. And what we wound up then is looking at 3 different dilutions, and this was condensing all of the data that we developed, and we found some tricks, at least, that work for us. First of all, if you look at immunoassays in general, the accuracy is plus or minus 1 dilution. Do we all agree on that? No? Don't know? Okay. What you find with the single antigen B data is it's stable over single dilutions. Patients with high MFIs change slowly. Antibodies that are greater than 15,000 at 1 to 32 are difficult to remove if you're desensitizing a patient. If you have an increasing prozone at 1 to 32, the patient is refractive to desensitization. And it's the most cost-effective scheme to run and still have an idea of what you're dealing with your patient. Case number 1. This is a 3rd kidney transplant done in April of 2008. The anti-globulin cytotoxic cross-match was negative. The flow was cross-match. Her CPRA was 100%. She had 6 out of 6 mismatched donor antigens, or 8 out of 8 counting DQ. They were A11, A2, B8, D52, DR14, 15, DQ5, and DQ6. She had antibodies against 84 Class 1 and Class 2 antigens. Seen patients like that before? You will. And what we found is that these antigens right here, for Class 1 and Class 2 antigens, had very low MFIs. They had a number of MFI, and these were stable through dilutions. They had a number of very positive antigens, but no donor-specific antibodies greater than 100. Well, you can guess what happened. She rejected almost in 7 days. And this is a pretty florid rejection right here. And if you look at C4D positivity, the peritubular capillaries all over light up. Well, the original wedge biopsy was negative. The needle biopsy, the first protocol biopsy, was a BANF grade 2, which was acute rejection, strong positive C4D staining around the peritubular capillaries. And what we did then was look at her antibodies post-transplant. Strong antibodies developed to many different HLA molecules in general, but moderate to strong antibodies against 5 of the 8 mismatched donor antigens, and you see that right here. And if you look at the 416 serum, the A2 in particular, and look at dilutions, all of a sudden you see this. You go from approximately 7,000 to almost 19,000, and then at 1 to 32 you're back to about 17,000. So she had a tremendous A2 response, as we probably would predict. 426, after extensive plasmapheresis, IVIG, and rituximab, her antibodies are now going down. And she kept the graft, and her creatinine is still sitting at about 1.2. So we rescued that graft, and she's now, this was done in 08, so she's 2 years out now. But she still has donor-specific antibodies. Case number 2 is a 56-year-old white female, a lung kidney candidate, PG0, transfusions 10, strong cytotoxic and flow cross-match results against 20 donors. She has 50 class 1 serum antibodies, and you can see her strength right here. 27 class 2 antibodies, strength right here. And also 8 DP antibodies that we wouldn't have even attempted to look at 5-6 years ago, but now we have the ability. I call the single antigen beads kind of like a field of dreams. If you build it, those antibodies or antigens will come and you'll be able to detect them. Okay, the dilution results then, and this patient, This patient, 1 to 8, or neat, 94% CPRA, and these were the strongest antibodies. 99% CPRA, these were the strongest antibodies. 1 to 32, 96%, 96%, and all of these were strong antibodies. The CPRA of this patient remained stable to 1 to 128 and then began to drop. So this is a highly immunized patient. This patient was refractory to repeated attempts to desensitize using apheresis and IVIG, rituximab, bortezomib, still had fluoride-positive cross-match reactions with now 30 donors and still remains on the active lung and kidney list. And I think Franz brought out the point earlier, we just have to, as much as we want to transplant everybody and improve their quality of life, we have to face the fact that there are just some patients that we're not going to be able to transplant yet. I'm an optimist. I think we're going to find ways of doing this eventually. Case number 3, 59-year-old white female liver kidney. If you look here, patient typing, the mismatched donor antigens are A2, B8, and DQ2. And you say, what do you mean mismatched antigens? There's DQ2 up there. This is a DQ0202. This is a DQ0201. All right? Antibodies. Class 1, 9 specificity. These are the ranges. Class 2, 18 specificities. These are the ranges. And she has a significant DSA donor-specific antibody against DQ2. And it's allele-specific. In the peak serum, it was 12,000 MFI. In the cross-match serum, it was 9,600. And if you look at her monthly totals through there for A2, you see that it looks like it's declined. But in looking here, you see the same thing as it goes across here. You've seen this before. You look at the cross matches for this donor, positive cytotoxic cross match at 1 to 2 and 1 to 4. Positive flow with the 243 mean channel shifts over a 61 channel shift cutoff. The DQ2 was 12,000 MFIs 4 months previously. It was 6